Industry Restructuring Raw Milk Pricing Methods Bill. Mr Speaker, in doing so, and at the beginning of my comments, can I declare that I am a shareholder of Fonterra, and in accordance with standing orders, I declare that interest. Mr Speaker, what we're talking about here as two previous speakers have talked about, is the raw milk regulation that Fonterra have to provide milk up to 600 million litres, up to 5% of their total milk production, to their competitors, the small and sometimes not so small companies that are also participating in the international and domestic markets in New Zealand. Fonterra represents now, Mr Speaker, and this is a figure I wish members of the House would actually take note of, Fonterra now represents 84% of export milk from New Zealand. 84%. Not the 93%, not the 95%, not the 100%, not the monopoly, not the figures that we often hear, but 84% of export milk, that's products that are made from milk that are exported from New Zealand annually. Fonterra is responsible for 84% of that, Mr Speaker. The Primary Production Select Committee, as was said by the Minister when he introduced the bill, considered a number of issues and listened to a number of submissions and did make some recommendations which I'm pleased have been accepted. One of the submissions was the Westland Dairy Company, which of course was one of the original I guess, companies involved in the Dairy Board, one of the legacy companies, I guess, at the beginning of the process that chose to stay out of the existing or the original merger, which formed Fonterra. And their submission was an excellent submission in the sense that it identified what the intent of this legislation was in the original bill, the DAERA Act of 2001, and said that they had actually been disadvantaged by it. This is another side of the argument. They'd been disadvantaged because of their location and because they understood entirely the intent of the raw milk regulation when it was first set up. They had chosen not to take up their entitlement to collect the 50 million litres that they would have been entitled to collect from this raw milk. And as it's turned out, that milk was at a subsidised price. And because other companies that export into the same markets as they do did choose to take that milk, they felt that they had been disadvantaged. So their submission was, should the Dairy Industry Restructuring Act be extended beyond the point where, of course, the triggers within the existing Act will be met, which is a percentage of milk in the South Island, which is not going through Fonterra plants or going through the Fonterra structure, and a percentage in the North Island. And as previous speakers have said, the South Island trigger is probably about 12 months away from being met, and the North Island trigger 2 or 3 years on current forecasts, which means within 3 years, maybe 4, the current raw milk regulations will expire or could expire. And so the debate going forward is whether or not they should be extended or that Act should be extended. And I guess the question is, what percentage of milk going through Fonterra into our exported markets is acceptable? Because if 84% is still too high, then what percentage would people be happy with? And if you compare that with other primary industry structures, such as our meat and wool structures, what you'll find there when you talk to those people is that they feel their industry is too fractured. And they potentially will come to government at some stage and ask for some assistance somehow or other to merge companies so that they can get more critical mass into their export structures. So there's the debate in essence, Mr Speaker. The committee were happy with the general direction, as the Minister said when he announced changing from the raw milk regulation we previously had in terms of pricing to the current proposal, which is that it will be Fonterra farm gate price plus 10 cents to take into account the shoulder milk or seasonal supply of milk. Mr Speaker, I think that's a good step forward. The 10,500 shareholders and farmers that represent Fonterra and also represent something like 25% of this country's export earnings will be happy to hear that that has happened, because there was a subsidy as it was before. and, Mr Speaker, I commend the bill to the House.